The Atlantic gets all the glory. The Pacific, massive and majestic, but the Indian Ocean. It sits quietly between continents often ignored in both history and exploration. Yet, long before cargo ships and colonial fleets, this ocean was alive, not just with traders but with civilizations. Entire networks of islands and ports humming with life. And one of them has vanished without a trace. No name, no ruins. Just scattered myths, missing maps, and a trail of anomalies stretching from Madagascar to Indonesia. The Indian Ocean is the world's third largest ocean, but culturally, it's treated like a corridor rather than a destination. It's not just geography, it's psychological. The Atlantic became the focus of colonization, the Pacific, the stage for World War and nuclear tests. But the Indian Ocean remained peripheral, yet, thousands of years ago, it was anything but peripheral. From ancient Oman to the southern tips of Java, mariners mapped the monsoon winds. These seasonal shifts became the very clockwork of early trade. Ships didn't fight storms, they rode them. That precision required observation, mathematics, and deep experience passed through generations. Archaeologists now suspect that small coastal settlements were in fact nodes, hubs in a wide decentralized system. You didn't need a capital city when the capital was the sea itself. This ocean wasn't quiet. It pulsed, it sang with languages, spices, and traditions crossing boundaries long before they had names. Merchants moved cinnamon from Sri Lanka to the Horn of Africa. Pearls from Bahrain met silk from China in harbors now buried in mud. It's not that this empire didn't leave behind history. It's that we've forgotten how to read it. Because in the Indian Ocean, memory doesn't live in marble. It lives in currents, in the shape of sails, in the rhythms of trade winds, and if you know where to listen, this quiet ocean will start to speak. Madagascar is weird. Its animals are weird. Its plants are weird, and its people even weirder in the best possible way. Linguistically, the Malagasy language is closely related to a dialect from Borneo. Yet, it's over 7,000 kilometers away. How did people from Southeast Asia end up on an island off Africa's coast? The answer: a maritime empire that once controlled the Indian Ocean. Artifacts found in Madagascar include Indonesian shipbuilding tools, South Indian coins, and African wood carving styles, all from the same century, but there's no empire listed in the records, no sultanate, no kingdom, just silence. Anthropologists have long been baffled by Madagascar. This giant island off the southeast coast of Africa seems like a world unto itself, a genetic, cultural, and ecological outlier. But the biggest mystery lies not in its lemurs or baobabs, but in its people. The Malagasy don't look like just one group, they carry both African and Austronesian DNA. Their language, surprisingly, isn't a Bantu language like most of Africa, but belongs to the Malayo-Polynesian family. The closest linguistic cousin, the Manyom language of Borneo, over 7,000 kilometers away. And this isn't a case of random migration. Recent genetic studies suggest that a small group of women, perhaps only 30, made the journey from Southeast Asia to Madagascar sometime between 300 to 500 CE. But women don't lead exploratory missions. They migrate with families, with purpose that implies infrastructure, ships, navigation, and empire. The presence of Indonesian-style outriggers, South Indian spices, and Bantu iron working techniques in a single location suggests not merely trade but integration. Madagascar wasn't a waypoint, it was a node in a broader system that linked two ends of the ocean, but curiously, no chronicles from Java, India, or Africa explicitly mention this union. It's as if someone tried to delete the chapter before it was ever written, yet the island remains, a living fossil. A linguistic and cultural Rosetta Stone pointing to a time when the Indian Ocean was ruled not by nations but by navigators. Off the Kenyan and Tanzanian coast lie dozens of ruins. Stone cities, coral mosques, docking piers under the ocean. Some have names: Kilwa, Gedi, Shanga. Others have none. But they all share one odd feature: sudden abandonment. These weren't destroyed by war, there's no fire, no conquest, they were left. It's as if the people just disappeared, or worse, left in a hurry, for a reason we never recorded. What drives a thriving maritime network to vanish overnight? Archaeologists working along the East African coast have uncovered remains of well-planned urban settlements built from coral rag with evidence of plumbing, open courtyards, and even trade-specific quarters. These weren't fishing villages. These were cosmopolitan ports. Kilwa, for example, was once considered one of the richest Swahili trading cities. Ibn Battuta himself wrote of its prosperity in the 14th century. Yet, much of Kilwa was already in decline long before Portuguese fleets arrived. Why? Then there's Gedi, hidden in a coastal forest in Kenya. Gedi has stone mosques, multi-room houses, and even flush toilets centuries ahead of its time, but no graveyards, no royal tombs, and no reason why the inhabitants left. Many of these cities show signs of sudden abandonment, but not destruction. Walls still stand. Paths are clean. It's as if they closed the doors one night and walked into the ocean. Some oral traditions mention the sea calling them back, while others speak of foreign winds that carried people away. But what if these stories are more than myths? Could these cities have been temporary colonies of a maritime empire? Like modern shipping hubs, abandoned when trade routes shifted? Or were they evacuated in the face of something larger: war, disease, or an environmental event we've never recorded? Whatever the cause, the silence of these ports speaks louder than ruins ever could. Because when an entire coast stops speaking, history loses a voice. Before European colonization, the Indian Ocean had its own version of globalization. Spices from India, ceramics from China, gold from Zimbabwe. These were traded using ships made of stitched planks, vessels so advanced that they survived typhoons, without nails, and running these networks. A coalition of coastal cultures, not a single empire, but a decentralized maritime syndicate. So, why is it absent from every history textbook? Simple. They didn't build pyramids. They built ships. And ships vanish long before Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope. A thriving commercial web spanned the Indian Ocean, and it wasn't built by kings, it was built by traders, craftsmen, sailors, and navigators who spoke a dozen tongues and carried goods farther than most empires could dream. These merchants didn't need a central government. Their allegiance was to wind patterns, seasonal tides, and mutual benefit. They understood monsoons like a scientist understands gravity. A merchant in Gujarat might send cloth to Zanzibar, exchange for ivory, then sail to Java for spices. Their vessels stitched boats sewn with core roper and engineering marvel. Lacking nails, they flexed with the waves, surviving storms that would snap rigid hulls. Greek historians even mention them in awe, yet today they are barely taught in maritime history. Evidence shows that ports across India Oman, East Africa, and Southeast Asia shared standardized weights, similar scripts, and iconography, signs of economic integration far deeper than mere barter. But here's the twist. When Europeans arrived, they mapped the Indian Ocean as if they discovered it. They redrew routes, renamed coasts. And in doing so, they buried centuries of decentralized trade dominance under the flag of colonial empires. So why is this network absent from most history books? Because it didn't leave behind cathedrals or conquests. It left behind connection. And connection doesn't make a good monument. But it might be the most powerful legacy of all. In 2002, sonar scans off the coast of Gujarat revealed rectangular structures 40 meters beneath the water. Too geometric to be natural, too eroded to be modern. Locals speak of cities the sea took. Ancient texts mention Dwaraka, a legendary city swallowed by waves. Further east, in the Maldives and Lakshadweep, GPS scans have shown symmetrical ridge lines under the ocean floor. No one investigates, maybe because no one wants to rewrite the map. When sonar images off the coast of Gujarat first revealed rectangular patterns beneath the waves, many assumed it was a software glitch. But as deeper scans followed, the lines became clearer: walls, grids, possible steps, and right-angled foundations. If these were natural formations, they were unnaturally perfect. These discoveries led to renewed interest in Dwaraka, the legendary city of Lord Krishna. Ancient texts describe it as a port city with golden towers, bustling streets, and harbors full of ships until it was swallowed by the sea in a single night. For centuries, scholars dismissed this as a metaphor, but what if it wasn't? In the Maldives and Lakshadweep, local fishermen have long spoken of lost islands their ancestors once visited. Modern GPS topography supports their tales: undersea ridges, flattened platforms, and straight-edge escarpments too symmetrical to be volcanic. Even in Sri Lanka, divers have found submerged stone columns and steps near ancient temples, suggesting coastal regression far more severe than sea level change alone would explain. So what happened? Some theories point to massive tectonic activity, a sudden shift in the ocean floor that caused tsunamis and localized collapses. Others whisper about melting ice sheets, triggering a rapid ocean rise that consumed entire shorelines in just decades. But perhaps the most provocative idea: that some of these cities were intentionally built near the water, to remain hidden or to be sacrificed. Because sometimes civilizations don't just vanish, they drown their own history. Most historical timelines begin around 1500 when Europeans start exploring the world. But what about before that? There are 1,000 years missing from our Indian Ocean record. And during that time, someone was building ships, connecting languages, and spreading symbols no one today can translate. Some theories suggest that this empire was erased not by war or disaster, but by cartographic censorship. Colonial powers redrew maps, removed what didn't fit the narrative. After all, history belongs to the victors, and the oceans had no voice. Take a look at most history textbooks, and you'll find a strange pattern. The Indian Ocean barely exists before 1500 CE. The historical timeline seems to jump from isolated coastal tribes straight to Portuguese sails. But what happened between 500 and 1500 CE? A full millennium of maritime silence. Scholars believe this blackout isn't due to a lack of activity, but a lack of interest, or worse, a deliberate omission. When colonial powers took control of trade routes, they didn't just erase borders, they rewrote narratives. European Mapmakers like Mercator and Ortelius redrew coastlines, replacing indigenous place names with Latinized terms. Any settlements not tied to a European flag were downgraded, ignored, or labeled as undiscovered. Entire navigational systems like the Arab star maps or Austronesian wine charts were dismissed as folklore rather than scientific tools, even when physical evidence was found: Indian coins in Java, Chinese porcelain in Tanzania, Swahili inscriptions. In Oman, these were treated as anomalies, not parts of a larger web. This wasn't just a loss of facts. It was a loss of continuity. Without written records, oral traditions were deemed unreliable. Without stone monuments, wooden docks were forgotten. And so, an empire that once spanned oceans was buried not beneath sand or sea, but beneath bureaucracy and bias. The result: 1,000 years of global exchange, wiped clean with the stroke of a pen, but the ocean remembers, and its silence is not empty. Despite the silence, the echoes remain. Batik patterns in Indonesia match tribal etchings in Mozambique. Drums in South India follow the same rhythms as ancient Malagasy ceremonies, words, myths, symbols, all scattered but aligned. It's as if a single culture was shattered into pieces and each coast got a shard. We don't know their name, but we can trace their soul. When you compare the musical scales of Madagascar's traditional instruments and those of South India, you hear more than coincidence, you hear kinship. The same goes for batik dyes, burial practices, even lullabies shared by islanders from Mozambique to Java. These are not isolated echoes, they are resonances of a long-lost chord once played across the Indian Ocean. Linguists have mapped dozens of loan words shared between Malay, Swahili, Tamil, and even Malagasy. Words for rice, boat, trade wines all show signs of cross-pollination, not colonization. This suggests centuries of peaceful exchange rooted in cooperation and mutual respect. Even food tells the story: coconut-based curries, fermented fish, pastes, and banana leaf steaming techniques exist in parallel across thousands of kilometers. These are not culinary coincidences. They are the fingerprints of a shared maritime culture. Archaeologists have also uncovered symbolic patterns, geometric etchings, and spiral motifs that appear on both pottery in Lamu, Kenya, and temple stones in Sumatra. These shapes carry no royal seal, no imperial banner, but they persist. Passed down through artisans, not kings, this isn't the footprint of a traditional empire. It's the shadow of a civilization that connected rather than conquered. Its legacy isn't measured in monuments but in stories, songs, spices, and symbols. And even though no one remembers their name, their soul survived the tide. This isn't your typical lost civilization. No golden statues, no stone temples, but trade logs, linguistic footprints, and ghost cities beneath the sea. It was an empire that built nothing permanent except connection. Maybe that's why we forgot it. Or maybe you were meant to forget, but the tides remember. And every wave that crashes onto African or Asian shores carries a whisper: we were here. We've been conditioned to measure greatness by what's left behind, by how high the towers stood, how thick the walls were, or how many statues still remain. But this empire wasn't built in stone. It was built in movement. Their monument was the ocean. Theirs was a world where the route mattered more than the destination, where connection outweighed conquest. Ports opened and closed with the monsoon winds. Trade wasn't just economic, it was cultural transmission on an unprecedented scale. They didn't leave behind cathedrals. They left behind currents of language, rhythm, ritual. Even today, Scholars resist calling it an empire because it didn't fit the mold. No single capital, no crowned ruler, no clear borders. But perhaps that's exactly what made it so powerful. It was fluid, resilient, and invisible to those who only know how to see what's carved in stone. Its disappearance wasn't sudden, it was systematic. Maps were altered, narratives rewritten. Silence fell like fog over its legacy, but the ocean is patient. It remembers and now, with sonar scans, linguistic analysis, and oral histories converging like puzzle pieces, we begin to see the silhouette. Return. This wasn't just a lost empire. It was a global culture in motion. And if we really listen to the waves, they're still whispering the same message. We never left, you just stopped looking.